I've been to hell. I didn't just survive it. I made it mine. Now hell answers to me.
Such an intense quote, right?
Oh, it really is. And if you spend, any time scrolling online, there's a very good chance you've heard that exact audio snippet.
Oh, yeah. Usually playing over some, like, super intense footage.
Exactly. Like someone pushing through a brutal workout at 4 in the morning or staring at a glowing laptop screen working late into the night. It's just visceral and it grabs you right by the collar.
It definitely does.
But here is the thing that most people hitting the like button on that viral empowerment Echo video, which by the way has like 160,000 views now, they don't actually know where it comes from.
Right. They think it's just a soundbite.
Exactly. They think it's just a random motivational quote cooked up by some influencer, but it's actually deeply rooted in a massive, sprawling lore.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that the quote is actually the core philosophy of a very specific, very foundational story. We are talking about a framework built on surviving things that, frankly, absolutely should have killed you.
Yeah.
And then deciding that merely surviving just, isn't enough.
So today, for you listening, our mission is to decode that exact story. We're taking a deep dive into the source material of the Saints Bloodline canon.
Which is just a massive universe.
It really is. And specifically, we are going to extract the defining mechanics of the oldest of its 4 factions, the Order of the Wolf.
Right, founded by Dorian Saints.
Yes, Dorian Saints in the Kingdom of Voldia. And the reason we're doing this deep dive isn't just to, recap fictional history.
Oh, not at all.
Because it's easy to look at fictional kingdoms with their castles and their banners and just see unapproachable superheroes. But today, we're really looking at a blueprint for everyday grit.
Yeah, the real-world application.
Exactly. We're unpacking how this lore translates directly into how you handle the worst days of your own life.
And to understand that wolf mentality, we really can't start by looking at the finished product. We have to look at the Kingdom of Voldia itself and Dorian Saints' place in it long before he ever wore a crown. Because the text establishes Voldia as this really harsh borderland.
It's not a soft place.
No, not at all. It isn't a place of idle luxury and endless banquets. Voldia was built by survivors. It is fundamentally a meritocracy governed by leaders who, really have to earn their keep.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where my brain immediately pushes back on the standard fantasy tropes.
Sure.
Usually when you read about a prince in Dorian is born to King Darlian and Queen Valeriana, the expectation is that they are just, waiting their turn.
Right. The spoiled royal trope.
Exactly. You picture the spoiled royal sitting in a castle, drinking wine, waiting for their aging father to just hand over the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, just inheriting it all.
Right. If we translate that to our world, it's like a CEO's kid who is absolutely guaranteed the corner office, but instead they choose to go work in the freezing rain on the loading dock.
Doing the heavy lifting.
Doing the heavy lifting just to prove they can.
And the psychology of that choice is really what sets Dorian apart from the beginning. His military training actually begins at age 10.
Which is young, even for fantasy.
Well, the sources note it's pretty traditional for Voldian nobility. But what isn't traditional is that by age 18, Dorian abandons the comfort of the palace entirely.
He just leaves.
He just leaves. He gathers a small personal army and ventures out into the wilderness on what he calls a crusade for justice, not conquest.
Wow.
He understands basically that authority given is never as strong as authority earned.
And his father, King Darlian, he doesn't try to stop him.
Far from it, actually. Darlian recognizes that for his son to eventually rule a kingdom of survivors, he has to first go out and bleed for it.
That's intense parenting.
Very Voldian parenting. The sources tell us Darlian actually supplied Dorian with the weapons and armor to go out and wage this crusade.
So Dorian makes this radical choice to earn his authority in the dirt. But if you're trying to attract an army of hardened survivors to a crusade, you can't exactly show up in royal gold.
No, they'd laugh you out of the camp.
Right. So how did he visually signal to these warriors that he was one of them?
Well, he strips away all the regal pageantry. The visual identity of his growing force becomes entirely utilitarian.
Okay, what does that look like?
The sources describe these warriors wearing gray armor with crimson hoods, and they're fighting under red banners bearing a wolf sigil.
Gray and crimson.
Yeah. The gray armor represents the grit, the reality of the dirt and the stone they are sleeping on every night.
And the crimson?
The crimson hoods represent the blood, the life, and the sacrifice. It creates this really unified visual identity for people who are chosen to endure the elements together.
But what is wild to me, just looking at these sources, is that while Dorian had this backing and he had these human comrades in his early crusade,
Yeah.
his most defining ally during this time, the one who shapes the entire future of the faction, wasn't human at all.
Right. The lore becomes deeply, deeply personal during this 5-year crusade in the
It
wilderness.
really does.
Dorian's defining relationship is forged with an animal.
Let's lay out exactly how that happens. So, between the ages of 18 and 23, Dorian is out on this mission of justice, and he comes across a wolf.
Very specific wolf.
Right, this wolf is badly wounded, completely alone, and basically on the brink of death.
Hmm.
And Dorian, this prince on a crusade who theoretically has an entire war to wage.
He has places to be.
Right. He stops his momentum entirely. He just stays in the wilderness and nurses this wild animal back to health. He names the wolf Ezekio.
Yeah, Ezekio.
And when Ezekio is finally healed, he doesn't just run off back into the woods. He stays.
He becomes part of the pack.
Exactly. He becomes Dorian's constant companion, fighting right beside this growing army of men. Until, tragically, Ezekio is killed in battle while actively protecting Dorian.
It's a huge turning point.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Ezekio represents the purest distillation of unconditional loyalty in the entire canon.
Unconditional being the key word there.
Absolutely. Think about the psychology of the men following Dorian at that time. They believed in justice, yes, but human beings are complex. We calculate.
We want to know what's in it for us.
Exactly. We constantly run an internal ledger. We ask, if I follow you into this fight, what is my reward? What is my rank? What is my legacy?
Right.
Ezekio ran no such calculus. He was the first entity in Dorian's life to give absolutely everything up to his own life without a single moment of calculation or condition.
He didn't need a royal decree or a promise of land to protect Dorian. He just shielded him.
Right.
But as a reader, as someone looking at this massive, sprawling history of a kingdom, why is this specific loss the one that matters most?
What do you mean?
Like, out of a whole war, out of decades of conflict and thousands of casualties, why does the death of one wolf become the permanent symbol of the entire Order of the Wolf?
Because Ezekio was the first profound loss Dorian experienced, and it taught him the agonizing cost of loyalty.
The actual cost.
Yeah. The wolf emblem that every single warrior eventually wears on their armor. It isn't there because Dorian thought it looked cool or intimidating.
Right.
It is a permanent tribute to Ezekio. It is a deeply personal declaration from every warrior that says, I know what loyalty costs. I know it might cost me my life.
Wow.
I have paid that cost before, and I'm willing to pay it again. It establishes the foundational rule of the faction. Loyalty isn't a transaction. It's a blood oath.
That is so powerful. But that isolated crusade in the woods, with those hard lessons about loyalty, it can only last for so long, though. Reality eventually catches up.
Oh, it hits him head on at age 20.
The timeline moves fast here.
Very fast. King Dorian passes away, and Dorian is thrust onto the throne. He inherits this massive, powerful military force, and he immediately merges it with the fiercely loyal, battle-tested warriors from his personal crusade.
So he has the crown, he has the numbers, and the sources say by the time he is 23, he leads this newly formed Order of the Wolf into a massive 2-year war.
Against Lord Barbcassios and the Frenerth Empire.
Right. But when you have an army that large, the leadership dynamic has to shift, right? How does he actually lead them into this conflict?
First in, last out.
That's his rule.
That is his absolute non-negotiable standard. It wasn't just some military strategy sketched on a piece of parchment. It was his fundamental identity.
Who he was.
Exactly. And the text details his visual identity across 3 distinct looks during this era, depending on his environment.
Okay, break those down for us.
So when he is acting in a royal or ceremonial capacity, he wears this polished, chromish suit.
Chromish.
Yeah, chromish being this dark, obsidian-like metal used in the lore to project regal intimidation to foreign dignitaries.
Oh, gotcha. Like a status symbol.
Right. But out in the field, he reverts to his battle look, which is worn practical gray chainmail built purely for survival.
But across all of those outfits, there are constants. Like, he always wears the crimson red hood and cape.
Yep.
He always wears the wolf emblem for Ezekio.
Yeah.
He always wears this bone skull mask that has visible, deep blade strike cracks carved into it.
The mask is brilliant psychological warfare, honestly.
How so?
Well, those blade strike cracks aren't repaired or smoothed over by royal blacksmiths. They are worn as evidence of endurance.
Oh, I see.
When his enemies, or even his own men, look at him, the mask basically says, I have taken the heaviest hit you can deliver, and I am still standing.
Now here's where it gets really interesting for me.
Yeah.
Because when you read fantasy lore, or really any kind of epic world building, the ultimate leader always has some kind of supernatural tell.
Oh, totally.
They put on the terrifying skull mask and suddenly their eyes are glowing red, or they are shooting lasers, or they possess this demonic aura.
God mode.
Exactly. But the sources are incredibly specific about Dorian's eyes. Behind the cracked skull mask, his eyes are just human brown.
Just normalize.
They never glow, they never turn magic, and for me, that completely changes how we view him. He isn't a supernatural god coming down from the heavens to save people.
And that's intentional. The text leverages that lack of magic to make a crucial point about endurance.
Because if he had magic...
If Dorian had glowing red eyes and magical invulnerability, his survival wouldn't be impressive at all. It would just be a superpower.
Right. It's easy to survive when you can't be hurt.
Exactly. By explicitly keeping his eyes human brown, the lore tells the reader and the warriors who follow him that everything he survived is something a baseline human being endured.
Which makes it so much more relatable.
It strips away the excuse that you need to be special or chosen to survive hell. You don't need magic. You just need the grit to be the first one in and last one out.
Okay, so he wins this brutal 2-year war against the Fran Earth Empire. He is 25 years old. In any normal fantasy story, this is where the credits roll.
Happily ever after.
Right. He meets and courts Silas Saints. Does he actually get his happily ever after here?
Well, for a brief window, yes. We enter what the lore calls the Golden Era. Scylla is a remarkable figure in her own right. She is the founder of the Order of the Veil.
Right. The sources note she's a survivor who escaped a burning city.
Exactly. Her faction specializes in intelligence, stealth, and basically moving unseen.
So they complement each other.
Perfectly. When Dorian and Scylla marry, they combine their forces. Two orders become one incredibly robust Kingdom of Voldia.
And they have kids, right?
Yes, they have 2 sons. Adonius is born when Dorian's 27, and Octavius follows when he is 29. The bloodline is secure, the kingdom is unified and thriving. The text explicitly notes, quote, "and for a time, Voldia held."
Which is the absolute ultimate warning sign in any historical canon.
Oh yeah, the foreshadowing there is heavy.
So heavy. Jump forward. Dorian is 47 years old. He is away from the kingdom. And while he is gone, Scylla is assassinated in their own chambers by a group called the Hand of the Lord.
Yeah, the Hand of the Lord represents an extremist faction in the lore.
Why did they target her specifically?
They viewed this unified, secular superpower of Voldia as a direct threat to their own ideological control. Targeting Scylla was a calculated strike to break the kingdom's very foundation.
And the fallout is absolute devastation. I mean, it splinters the family entirely.
It really does.
The youngest son, Octavius, is so consumed by grief and rage that he completely leaves Voldia to found the Order of Chaos.
Yep.
And the older son, Adonius, returns home with Quitsario and the Bragan Riders, only to find his mother dead and the home he knew irrevocably destroyed.
It's a total collapse.
Wait, hold on. Time out. We literally just spent a whole segment talking about how brilliant it is that Dorian is just a regular guy with human brown eyes, absolutely no magic, just pure grit.
Yeah.
And now you're casually mentioning that his oldest kid is flying around on dragons. How does that fit the whole grounded survival theme?
It's a great catch, and honestly, it actually reinforces Dorian's theme.
How so?
Because the magic exists in this world, absolutely. Dragons exist. Supernatural forces exist. But that actually makes Dorian's path more impressive.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Right. He's a baseline human competing on a chessboard where dragons and magical entities exist. And he holds his own using nothing but his tactical mind, his pack, and his sheer endurance.
Okay, that makes sense. But I want to pause here because looking at the timeline, the emotional weight of this is staggering.
It's unimaginable.
His wife is murdered in their sanctuary. His youngest son abandons him in a rage. His oldest comes back to a broken home with dragons.
Yeah.
If you're Dorian, everything you sacrificed your youth to build is just ash. The natural human instinct is to either go entirely numb or burn the rest of the world down in revenge.
Right.
How does a leader whose entire philosophy is built around the pack keep going when the pack itself is what broke?
This raises an important question about the actual mechanics of endurance.
Okay.
Think of a lone wolf, like a single load-bearing pillar in a building. If that one pillar takes too much damage and cracks, the entire roof caves in.
Makes sense.
That is what happens when hyper-independent leaders face catastrophic loss. They collapse. But the Order of the Wolf is structured like a massive grid of columns.
A whole support system.
Exactly. When Dorian's personal pillar breaks, when he loses Scylla and his family fractures, the weight of his grief and his leadership doesn't crush him because the broader pack immediately absorbs the load.
So he doesn't have to hold it all by himself.
Right. He still feels the agony, obviously, but the structure holds him upright. The core wolf philosophy isn't that you only endure when things are going well or when your pack is at full strength.
It's tested when things fall apart.
Yes. The philosophy is that the wolf endures even when the pack is smaller, even when the wound is the kind that will never ever heal.
Wow.
He carries the loss of Scylla, the rage of Octavius, the disillusionment of Adonius, and yet he wakes up, he puts on the great chainmail, and he remains the first in and the last out.
Because you don't get to stop being a leader just because your heart is broken.
No, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Endurance isn't glamorous. It is a grueling, uncelebrated decision made every single day in the dark.
So, what does this all mean? How does this epic, sweeping lore of gray armor and dragon riders connect to the Empowerment Echo real-world philosophy?
That's a big question.
Because we started this deep dive talking about a viral video of someone pushing through a workout, framing this lore as a highly practical tool.
Well, we have to distill the mythology into mechanics.
Yeah.
How do we take the gray armor and the crimson hood into a corporate boardroom or a hospital waiting room or into the silent struggles of our own daily lives?
The sources give us a very clear list of themes that translate from the Order of the Wolf directly into real-world application.
What are the main ones?
It's about brotherhood, protecting the vulnerable, moving unseen, and the pack mentality. And when I look at this list, the concept that jumps out at me most is endurance over brilliance.
Oh, absolutely.
I think about the old fable of the tortoise and the hare. Right, the hare is brilliant, fast, naturally gifted, but the wolf philosophy is basically the tortoise, if the tortoise was wearing gray chainmail, had a cracked skull mask, and absolutely refused to quit no matter how much it was bleeding.
That is a very vivid image.
Right. It's about showing up every single day, especially on the days you aren't at your best.
And the lore draws a very sharp distinction that we need to highlight here, which is a difference between surviving and thriving.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Well, the modern world often pushes this narrative of the lone wolf.
Oh, all the time.
We see this hiker-independent grind set culture that tells you to cut everyone off, trust no one, and build your empire alone.
Right, the whole I don't need anybody vibe.
Exactly. And a solitary wolf out in the wilderness can survive. It can scavenge, it can scrape by. But the Order of the Wolf rejects that isolation entirely.
Because survival isn't enough.
Right. They understand that a wolf with a pack thrives. You are exponentially stronger and much more resilient to tragedy with the right people around you.
There is a line from the sources that embodies this perfectly. It says, "The wolf does not hunt alone, neither do I."
That's it right there. And connected to that pack mentality is the concept of strength in stillness, which actually ties back to Scylla's Order of the Veil.
Moving unseen.
Yes. In our reality, that means doing the work without needing to perform it. The wolf doesn't need to post its accomplishments for external validation. It waits.
It just does the work.
It does the grueling, unglamorous work in the shadows, and when it finally moves, it is already too late for the obstacle in front of it to respond.
That's so effective.
But perhaps the most vital, immediate, real-world application from these sources is the absolute rule of never abandoning the wounded.
Which is hard because in a hyper-competitive environment, whether that's climbing the corporate ladder or just navigating a fast-paced society, if someone next to you is struggling, the instinct is often to distance yourself.
Right, you don't want to get pulled down.
Exactly. You leave them behind so you don't lose your own momentum.
But the Wolf Code views that as the ultimate failure. Slowing down your own progress to carry someone who is struggling, whether they are dealing with grief, burnout, or failure, isn't a weakness.
It's expected.
It is the absolute non-negotiable standard. Go back to Ezekio in the woods. He was bleeding out. Dorian could have marched on to his crusade, but he stopped. And later, Ezekio didn't ask what he would get in return for his loyalty. He just showed up. And that is what you do for your people.
Man, to wrap this up and bring it all home, the Order of the Wolf, Dorian Saints, the Kingdom of Voldia, none of this is about being the strongest person in the room.
Not at all.
It's not about having magical glowing eyes or a life free of tragedy and heartache. It is entirely about getting up every single time the smoke clears.
Every single time.
It's about paying the heavy cost of loyalty without complaining, and it is a stubborn, absolute refusal to hunt alone. For you listening, whether you are trying to build a business, keep a family together, or just survive a really dark chapter in your own life, this framework is deeply practical.
It's very practical.
It's endurance over brilliance. It's showing up unconditionally for your pack, even when your own load-bearing pillar feels like it's cracking.
It really is a powerful shift in perspective from the typical motivational advice.
It really is.
And as we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We've talked a lot today about Dorian finding his ego in the woods, stopping his momentum to nurse him back to health, and how that defined his standard of loyalty.
Yeah.
But think about your own lives and your own pack. When you are the one who is wounded, when you are the one bleeding, overwhelmed, and unable to keep up the pace, are you willing to let your pack carry you?
Oh, wow.
Because true pack mentality isn't just about having the grit and the strength to carry others. It's about having the profound humility to be carried when you can no longer walk on your own.